We're talking about how to bring a U-turn in our churches, how to get our churches oriented on mission, focused on outreach, so that people in our church are excited about reaching out, and so that more and more people are coming to Christ through our church. And I've shared one part of that out of three that what we've seen actually makes a huge difference in the culture of churches and in what God is doing through churches and outreach. The first thing that we talked about is leaders need to be in accountability groups that meet every 30 days as a minimum to talk about their personal witness, share their stories, and get encouragement, inspiration, and some instruction on personal witness. If people check in like that every 30 days, you would not believe the difference. We've seen that with our groups of pastors that we're meeting with. They come together, and a lot of times they'll say, oh, I've got my accountability group, my huddle coming up. I'd better do something about that. I'd better share, with a neighbor or a friend, or pray for somebody, or do something, or pray for my waitress. And almost every time people come in with stories, and sometimes that accountability group is the catalyst for it. But what we've seen is as people share stories, it makes a huge difference. And what we've also seen is they problem solve with each other. We had one pastor say, I'm too busy. There's no way I can reach my neighbors. I just deal with the people my people bring me. And one of the other pastors said, you can't do that. You're asking your people to find the time. How can you not take the time to reach your neighbors and the people you're connected to? You need to be modeling what you want them to do if you want to draw them into it. And I remember that pastor then problem solving with the pastor who'd raised the issue and talking about things like twofers. What can I do that I'm already doing that I can include people who don't know Jesus in? Am I coaching? Am I doing stuff with my kids? Am I going to the movies? Am I watching the Super Bowl? How can I involve people who don't know Jesus in what I'm already doing? How can I get a twofer? And that was very liberating for that pastor. And he had a transformational experience. He started reaching out, and he saw one of his neighbors come to Christ. And I tell you, that was the end. There was no more, reasons why we can't reach out. And it was a huge, contagious kind of influence on his congregation. So that's part one, every 30-day accountability. Part two, what our huddles do is we help leaders think about how to get every leader on their church taking ownership for evangelism, for outreach. Too often churches give it to a committee, and then the committee makes plans and runs programs and begs everybody to be part of them. And what happens is all the people who believe in evangelism come to the events already, and it doesn't change the culture of the church. In order to change the culture of the church, every leader needs to take responsibility for integrating outreach into what they're doing and what they're leading. And then you begin to change the culture of the church. So kids ministry needs to do that. High school ministry needs to do that. The worship team needs to do that. The preaching team needs to do that. The ministry of the homeless needs to do that. Every ministry, men's ministry, integrates a concern, begins to, if you will, shift the focus of their ministry just a couple degrees over into the people in the world, the people who don't know Jesus yet. And it's been amazing to see the impact. I think of a men's ministry that started an event at a public place near a lake, and it's the best thing they've ever done in outreach, and it's because they took their strength, men's ministry, and they vectored it out into the community. Very powerful. So that's the second, getting every leader to own that. And it's been fun again to watch the pastors coach each other and encourage each other and resource each other and give each other ideas. We have one of our churches in a cohort helped another church in our cohort start a ministry to feed the hungry and to integrate evangelism into that. And that idea has taken off in that second church, and it's become a vital, vibrant part of their witness. So that's number two. Number three is we help churches develop pathways to come to Christ. I think of a church that had mobilized a lot of their people to share Christ, and they were doing a great job at that, but they didn't have any pathways for people who don't know Jesus to come to Christ through the church. So they would occasionally lead people to Christ out in the community. And I found out after 5 years, they had had 80 people commit to Christ out there in the community. And do you know how many of them had become part of the church, at least their church? 2 out of 80. And actually, when he said 2, because I was asking him, he said, oh, well, no, wait a minute. One of them's not there anymore. It's actually 1 out of 80 people. Now, we're not called to make converts or decisions. We're called to make disciples. That's what evangelism is the front end of. We're making and deepening disciples. So our church has to have pathways for people all the way from when they're not Christian and even a long way from God until they become Christian and become disciples. And so we help pastors think about the steps that folks go through to become Christian and become a disciple, and then how their church can help begin to put in place those steps, ways to serve people who don't know Jesus so that they can become part of the community earlier, long before they have to believe, and make the journey to Christ through the community, the ecclesia, the people of God, on mission. Don't we long for that? Don't you want to see your leaders checking in with some group, some huddle every 30 days, keeping themselves accountable for personal witness? Don't you want to see every leader in your church taking responsibility and ownership for outreach? And don't you want to see your church have pathways so people who don't know Jesus can make the journey into discipleship and into and through your church? I long for that. I know you do.